Oh, wait, before I even start explaining myself, this is for the people that are in a hurry. You take a shallow depth of field lens like this 50mm f1.8. You take something that can reflect light like a smartphone, even if it's a broken one for example, you put it in front of the lens and that's how you get the lens effects. And with different lighting scenarios, you get different effects. Now that I've basically saved a couple of minutes of your time, you can maybe, just maybe, leave a like and subscribe, or I don't know. Okay, see ya! Going back to the main video in 3, 2, 1.
We came here and I shot a cool B-roll sequence to film for the video, but it's too loud!
Hear that? Peace and quiet. Now I'm going to start this off by saying that if you don't have a camera with a lens that has a wide aperture that can create a shallow depth of field, this is probably not going to work for you. Also, I suggest using at least a 35mm and above lens, because the wider it gets, the less shallow depth of field it has as well. Like this wide shot for example, right now I'm using a 10mm lens and you can see my face that it's in focus, but you can still see a lot of the background as well. Whereas if I change my lens to something like a 50mm lens, now you can see that my face is in focus, but even my shoulder is starting to get blurry. And the background is much more indistinguishable than it was before. Now if I make the lens focus even closer, the blur behind me gets even bigger. Same thing applies to the things that are below the minimum focusing distance of the lens. If I take my smartphone for example and I move it much closer, exactly next to the lens, you can see that it's causing a reflection. That's what I'm essentially using for my effect. Back to wide. Now that's the basic of it. Now if I put my phone right in front of this lens, it's not gonna do the same because it's a wide lens and it also has a really small aperture. Now a wide angle lens is also one of the reasons why you can't use a smartphone. Now another big issue with smartphones is that they have small sensors. The smaller the sensor gets, the less of a shallow depth of field you have, even with a wide aperture like this one. The lens on this smartphone for example is at f1.5. Even in close focus, the blur in the background is really little. It's just physics, which reminds me of the third problem it has. Now do you see how thin this is? Basically the distance between the lens itself and the smartphone sensor is so minuscule that it's also helping our problem with the depth of field. So smartphones are a no-show. Even with the telephoto lens, you can't do anything. Let's talk about how to actually achieve this effect. Since I've started using reflections in my photos, I've noticed that there are two types of reflections. The first one is what I call the basic reflection. It just reflects whatever it's reflecting, especially the highlights whenever you're using a black screen for example. If you use something like this golden perfume for example, it won't be much of a reflection, but more of a golden blur type thing. Now let's talk about the second type of lens reflection. I call it the stripe reflection. I call it the stripe reflection because I need multiple small light sources to achieve this effect. Like in this concert shot for example, there are many different colored light bulbs. And depending on the angle I place the smartphone, depending on the lights that are above me, below me and everything, I achieve different type of effects. Just everything depends on experimenting most of the time. Another example I found out recently was with the ripples of water when it's facing direct sunlight. And since the water ripples are moving constantly, this effect is really good for video. So yeah, for the most part that's basically it. My camera's battery also decided that that's gonna be it for the video. So here's my pitch on like, share, subscribe. If you liked this video and found it helpful and you learned something, please give it a thumbs up, share it to your friends who you think also might be able to benefit from it, and subscribe for more dope content coming soon. Okay, like the sunset, it's time to end this. Lubobachev over and out. Bye!